Welcome to this week's Race Through the States podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Jefferson, and on this week's show, we are less than 20 days away from Election Day. And of course, the United States election cycle feels like an eternity. And because we're closer than we've ever been, it's going to feel like an eternity still. And maybe then some. But I'm joined today by congressional reporter for Politico, Nicholas Wu. We sat down on Wednesday, and what you're about to hear are some unheard moments from our conversation, specifically about what he's hearing from members of Congress about the presidential race.
Most Democrats I've talked to are actually very satisfied with the national ticket. I mean, it's just a world of difference from, June, July, earlier this summer, after that disastrous debate for Joe Biden, where among many of Democrats, the mood was almost apocalyptic. Now, Democrats are feeling pretty good about their chances. They've seen internal polling move in the right direction for them. It's not a blowout victory. Or even we're not even seeing blowout margins in these polling, which is what I think this is where you see the difference in expectation setting behind some of the online discourse earlier this year versus, the fact that it still ends up being a very close race. And so that's it for Democrats. As for Republicans, I think, one thing that we've seen since 2016 is just the way Trump has reoriented so much of the party. And so sure, you might have some Republicans who break with Trump on specific issues or will sometimes but rarely criticize him. But, that's fewer and far between these days.
Yeah, and the margins for this national race are so thin. And then you go to the swing states and it's also very close. And I think that there may be some desire by both parties to really make it so it's not so tight. I'm sure the Harris campaign is probably experiencing the frustration of polls that are tied. Even SNL has mocked that. And then you have the Trump campaign that's really pushing the issue of the border and the economy, though for them, this is still a tight race as well. And what would you say is going to be the big strategy here?
Well, we see this in poll after poll that it's been the same all year. Voters care a lot about immigration policy. They care a lot about the economy and inflation. And that's part of why we're seeing, and of course, abortion. And that's why we're seeing so much of this play out in ads and congressional campaigns and, at the presidential level all around the country. Democrats see abortion as their most potent issue against Republicans heading into this election. Republicans see inflation and immigration as their biggest arguments against this administration and Democrats. And so, we'll see how this plays out on Election Day.
As we're kind of in these last 20 days, what do you expect to hear from congressional members who are up for re-election with regard to the messaging on their race and the national race?
Well, congressional Democrats I've talked to, I think, as with any campaign that has to, run its own race while at the same time having someone of their own party in the White House, faces the sometimes difficult challenge of demonstrating independence from the current administration if they need to, while reflecting on the fact that they are still part of the same team, part of the same party. That's where we see someone like Congresswoman Capter make a very interesting case for herself, because she's always struck a very pro-labor sort of policy position in her tenure in Congress, and sometimes that brings her into conflict with the Democrats in the White House. And so, we've even seen her run ads talking about her independence from the administration. At the same time, we saw a lot more of this a few months ago when Biden's numbers were really bad and Democrats felt like they needed to show even more independence from a president who was very unpopular. With Kamala Harris, it's a much different story.
So there you have it, that feeling of doom and gloom that loomed over the Democratic Party after that first debate between President Biden and former President Trump has dissipated. But now they have a new candidate, Vice President Kamala Harris, whose main challenge isn't age, but the economy. Despite the fact inflation has slowed back to pre-pandemic levels, prices are still high. They're just not rising as fast as they once were. So that is going to be something that the campaign is going to have to work on with regard to their messaging. Inflation is still there and voters feel that. And economic indicators don't tend to matter to the average person because they're just looking at their wallet. For the Trump campaign, a challenge they have in these final days, reproductive rights. Trump's running mate, Ohio Senator Jaden, said it during the vice presidential debate. Many individuals simply do not trust the Republican Party on the issue of reproductive rights. furthered by the overturning of Roe v. Wade by justices appointed to the Supreme Court by former President Trump, something that has really hurt his campaign, especially among female voters, who of course make up a large part of the electorate. But for now, this has been this week's edition of Race Through the States. For continuing coverage of the election, join me on social media at Jaden, Jaden_reports on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. And you can join me on Facebook as well, Jaden Jefferson Reports. This has been a podcast production of Jaden Jefferson Reports Studios. Have a great day.